Alright everyone, just going to do a couple sample problems from your quiz review file here. I'm going to do one of each section. So we'll do one factoring together, we'll do one square root method together, and we'll do one quadratic formula together. Alright? And then hopefully this will give you a guide as to how to do all the problems in each section. So solve by factoring. Now this should be review of this section because we spent an entire chapter, chapter 7, reviewing how to factor. Now these are all either GCFs or trinomials. You won't see, or difference of squares actually. If you won't see grouping here, you won't see, there was another one that you won't see, but it's usually just GCF or trinomials. So number 1 we'll do. Actually, we'll do number 1 and 2. This is a GCF because it's only 2 terms. So the GCF of 5x squared and 15x is going to be 5x. And then you put your parentheses. Then you're going to write on the inside of the parentheses what's left over. If you took 5x out of 5x squared, then you would have just an x remaining. And then if you took 5x out of 15x, what number would you need to multiply by to get back to that? You'd need to multiply by positive 3. And now that is factored. But the extra step involved is with the solving. Now you factored it, you're only halfway done. Now you have to solve it. So basically, which two numbers for x would make this thing equal to 0? So see this term right here, this 5x? If you wanted that thing to equal 0, then x would have to be 0. That's the only way 5x will get you to equal 0, is if it's 5 times 0. So that's one of your answers. And then the other answer comes from the parentheses in here. How do you get that to equal 0? Well, if x is negative 3, then that'll equal 0, the inside of the parentheses. And those are your two solutions. All right, that's a GCF problem. Number 2 is a trinomial. And if you remember how to do trinomials, you need to add up to the middle and multiply to the end number there. So what two numbers add up to negative 10 and multiply to 24? That would be negative 6 and negative 4. Now that is factored. Now we just have to solve it. So if you want this thing to equal 0, then which two numbers for x will make it equal 0? Well, very easy. 6 and 4. That's it. Those are your two solutions. Okay? So now it is solved by factoring. You could try number 3. Make sure you get number 3 into standard form first. So you'd have to get everything on one side. Number 4 is a trinomial that needs to be factored. That's a tricky try. If you remember how to do tricky tries. Because the number in front is not 1. See that number in front? It's a 2. It's no longer a 1. So it's a special type of factoring. Alright, square root method. So what you're doing is solving this for x. So basically just get everything isolated. Get the x isolated. So we're going to add 64 first. We're going to divide by 4 next. All right? You're solving for x. But the problem is it's not just x, it's x squared. So x squared equals 16. Right? So the reason why this is called the square root method is because you're going to have to wind up doing a square root step at the end. So when you have x squared, you want to get just x, you square root both sides. The square root and the squared cancel out. So you're left with x equals, and the square root of 16 is 4. But the only thing you must remember when you do square root method is that if you do square root of a number, you technically have two results that are possible. You have the positive 4 and the negative 4. And you put a plus minus symbol there in front to represent that. Because the square root of 16 is 4, but it's also negative 4. Because negative 4 squared is 16. Same way positive 4 squared is 16. Alright? That's all you do for these. Real quick, This one is a simple one. If you subtract 7, you get x squared equals -5, and then you try to square root a negative number. Remember, you cannot square root a negative number. If you ever get a negative number and you're square rooting it, there's no solution. Okay? And then finally, quadratic formula. You need to memorize this. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Alright? The a is the first number you see, the b is the second, the c is the third when it's in standard form. So a is 1 here, b is -5, c is -14. Okay? Those negative signs are attached to the numbers. So the negative of -5 is just 5, plus or minus, -5 squared, put it in parentheses, minus 4 times 1 times -14, all divided by 2 times 1. You're just plugging in here. You wind up with 5 plus or minus the square root of 25. 25 plus 56 you get under there. Because -4 times 1 times -14 is going to be a positive 56. So this comes out to 5 plus or minus the square root of 81 over 2. Square root of 81 is 9. So 5 plus or minus 9 over 2. And then finally, this really represents two answers here. It's 5 plus 9 over 2. Which is 14 over 2, which is 7. And then 5 minus 9 over 2. That's what that plus minus symbol means. It's two scenarios that are possible. You get -2 for that one. So your two answers are x equals 7, x equals -2. And we are done.